Hello, praise the Lord. St. Tyrone from the 404 coming live and direct to you. Microphone check, 1 2 1 2. I believe mic is working. It is. Microphone check, 1 2 1 2. All right, thank you so much. I didn't start off with a quote unquote download, or we call it the introduction or the countdown clock. This is a spur of the moment as I was watching something on television. I believe inspiration just came at me from God to discuss it. And this will be a spiritual discussion, but using a natural story. So the first thing I want to say is my name is Hank-Tryone from the 404 Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm coming live and direct right now. And we're here to talk specifically about this particular topic as you see in the title. BMF. BMF. I want to listen to the words. Black Mafia Family. Can you think about that for a moment? Black Mafia and a family. Okay. In the times of 1980s, where right now a lot of TV shows are coming on and talking about the 80s. As every decade passes, we understand that right now it's the 80s time. In about 7 years, it'll be the 1990s time, and in 20 years from now, it'll be the 2000s as I age 20 more years, God willing. All of us age 20 more years, God willing. First thing I want to do is I want to pray, ask God in my own mind, in my natural language, and then my spiritual language later on in private for revelation as we discuss some very deep, complex topics that are going on in this life. And I really think as a person, as a Christian, on this Sunday, why not talk about them? Why not make a blog and download it and then save it so it's locked in forever, and that I can be able to, you can be able to, we can be able to come back and have a discussion about it on different particular areas that are pertaining to me. This is for Beyond Open Doors Ministries International, as well as my other channels. Pastor Hank-Tryone from the 404. I make sure I don't touch that little microphone to my left. Wearing a headset, and it has a Jabra microphone. And sometimes when I accidentally touch it, it makes a sound. And of course, it comes out on the blog or on the TV, on the MP4 that's being created as we speak. And I don't want that. So I'm going to try to be as still as possible and try not to make any issues. What we're going to do right now is we're going to have a discussion about this particular show, Black Mafia Family. And for us to understand what Black Mafia Family is, I have to first and foremost show it to you. So this right here is the Black Mafia Family crime drama that is now on, which comes from rapper 50 Cent, who created this back in September 25th, 2001. But this is first been a creation of his shows, Power, and other shows that he created in Stars maybe about 8 years ago, 7 to 8 years ago, when black people were not able to have any type of content. So as a African American growing up in America, we know that there's really little content to watch in the 60s, well, 50s, definitely 60s, 70s. I grew up in the 80s. This TV show that we're talking about is actually talking about the 80s in Detroit and Atlanta. So it won't relate to me specifically where I did not grow up in those areas, or to you maybe. But some of it will relate, and I hope that we can find things that we can see in this that will relate. The thing that blows me away more than anything else is the fact that it's now 2023, and we're seeing content now for people that would have never been able to see this 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You know, they give it right now 4 stars out of 5 stars for this because, one, there is something that happened prior to this show and prior to Power, and it was called The Wire. When The Wire did Baltimore, Maryland, everyone said to themselves, this is the greatest show on television. And because The Wire is the greatest show on television, it is the standard that all television shows that I believe for the future are going to copy. I strongly believe this. I believe it. Something happened, but we're going to tell you my opinions why. The Wire, when it came out, it was not hailed at all as a success. Here's The Wire. When The Wire was released in June of 2002, I was right in Bible school. I was in seminary school, Rhema Bible Training Center College in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Going through the hardest collegiate parts of my life, studying the Word of God and learning about God. And when The Wire came out at this time, The Wire was groundbreaking, because what it did was it really went into Baltimore, Maryland, and talked about people, not just from the typical NYPD Blue, or if you know about crime genres, Law and Order, or before Law and Order, you had Hill Street Blues. And I mean, you can go on, for example, I have a streaming app here that I'm showing on my screen, and you can go on and look up old sitcoms from way back in the day, and you can just literally see the history of television. This is the sitcoms right now from just right now. But you can look at Law and Order, and if I just go back to crime and just pick the crime genre, which I just have to scroll down a little bit. Let me pick it. Oh, I don't know. I don't think it does. I think that's all the maybe it's under at war. I don't know. Nobody have a section called crime, but they don't. But if I click on classics, for example, you can kind of see some of the old shows. Ironside, McCloud, Have Gun Will Travel. I mean, The Heat of the Night. Okay. These are shows of the 70s, the 80s, and 90s. And then we get into Cadney and Lacey of the 80s. Let's see, we got any more? Of course, Different World. That's not a crime show. That's a show about college. This will not be an episode to talk about college, but this will be an episode to talk about crime and talk about African-American people underneath the things that we've fought and we've battled. And this will be a discussion of crime and what, if you see me scrolling, you notice in the videos, some of these are black and white. Have Gun Will Travel. And these are not all. There's over, I've got my streaming app has over 90,000 videos where I could be able to watch, and you can't watch them all. So, you know, but it's great to be able to go back and see stuff that was on VHS, on VCR. That was what we had when I was growing up. And then go into DVD and Blu-ray, and now we have it on streaming or MP4. And tomorrow we'll have it on MP5, MP6, MP7, whatever the technology is. I will be there to have it because I'm a technologist. But what I'm here to talk specifically about is I now get my notepad up and I start documenting minute by minute, because the best way for us to be able to talk about something is to document it. So to go to my favorites, I should see my two favorites in there right now, BMF and The Wire. And I'm here to do a little bit of a comparison between the two, because again, The Wire is what in 2002 precedes everything. And for most people today, they're not going to know what happened in 1990 or 1980 or 1970, except for those of us who lived it. And for all the millennials that'll be watching this that will have no clue because they were just born 15, 20 years ago, they have no clue. 20 years ago was 2002 when this show came out. Think about that. 20 years ago, or 2003, 23 today, so that means 20 years ago, 1 year ago, this show came out. 21 years ago. They just celebrated their 20th year, anniversary, and they deserve it. They deserve it. The Wire is phenomenal. Do you know that The Wire was not even selected as an Emmy? Do you know that Europeans watch this show religiously to the point where on YouTube there is content, videos that get 300, 400, 500,000 million views on just talking about the different individuals in The Wire. So the writers of this did such a great job that 21 years later, we're still seeing content on The Wire right now. What will be the case for the show we're talking about, Black Mafia Family? That's a question we're going to have to find out. But let's just read the actual information and talk about what the Black Mafia Family is at 10 minutes and 39 seconds. Let me get my notepad so I can put in that was my introduction, but now we'll get into my thoughts. And this is a general thing, because when we see Black Mafia Family, I want you to really think about it like this. Every city, drugs were the only opportunity for a lot of us to get into. Because if you think about the 50s and the 60s, where black people working for GM and General Motors, what happened? Well, they took the jobs away in NAFTA in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. What do you think happened to the blacks that were in those roles? They either could go become, teachers and make no money, drive buses, make no money. They were making no money. So what do you think some people would do, right? The answer is they're going to go and they're going to sell drugs. That's right. They're going to sell drugs. And the tragic part about it is, even with the curses, as we're going to talk about in a few minutes, that I believe, and this is my personal opinion, but I believe on the black people as a whole, and on many of us in America as a whole, the people that don't know, the little bitty people, my people, us 12%, us 40 million. And let's be honest, 40 million is nothing compared to having 8 billion on the planet. So let's make sure we put in honest truthfulness that we need to understand the relativeness of this earth and how 8 billion people live on this tiny ball, which sits in a universe of millions of planets. Think about that for a moment. Think about how great and magnificent God is when you start thinking about that. If it doesn't transform you, I don't know what will. It does to me. And so what blows me away more than anything else in the world is the fact that I feel strongly that the people of the African diaspora, the little 12% of the population, hallelujah. And I feel the presence of God as I just stopped there. So I had to pause because I sometimes, have to just be careful and just see, okay, Lord he doesn't talk to me. But what he does is he surrounds me with his glory or his presence, which kind of like is his way of saying, yeah, I agree with that. Or no, I don't. Or I really agree with that, if that makes sense. I guess this is a very spiritual conversation, so it's not something that any non-believer is going to watch. I mean, they're going to watch this video, but right off the top of the dome, you see who it's coming from. You understand it's pastor means minister, so I'm going to come from a minister or a pastoral perspective. And so So for me, the question I have to ask is, what is the BMF or Black Mafia Family television series? Well, to be in a very succinct manner, and also and having opinions, and I will be opinionated, the Black Mafia Family is just very similar to New Jack City of the 1980s 9 drama that came on the movies. New Jack City, New Jack Swing, New Jack, Aaron Hall, Guy. The point of hip hop. Oh, don't do that! Don't touch me! Don't! I'm gonna scratch. Sorry about that. The point of hip hop where crack came, and so New Jack City really was a movie about the 80s. It was a movie about 81, 82, 83. where cocaine turned into crack. Well, there's another TV show called Snowfall, which is also like the 80s, where cocaine turned to crack in LA. And then now this is Detroit's version. So what we're going to be seeing is we're going to be seeing a lot of people reminiscing to the 80s. Why? Because for all of us who are 48, 49, almost 50, this is who runs the earth right now. This is the people who watch the TV. And this is why the content's being done. Years ago, it was the 70s. There was a lot of content for those in the 70s. You don't see no content on for people in the 70s. Why? Because most of them are dying off. And now we're seeing content for the 80s. And then soon we'll be seeing the 90s content, which I lived in both of those decades. But I can truly say that the 90s was a completely different world for me, because I got born again in 97, but I also was in the military from 92 until 98, 99, 2000. And I transformed from being in that. So the Black Mafia family is, I believe, partly a new vision or lesson of what the Snowfall TV show is on right now. That's about Freeway Ricky Ross and LA and Africans that live in that area, and how drugs were brought in through COINTELPRO and the FBI and the CIA and the Contras, and how they were able, if you were alive back in those days, you will remember Oliver North and standing up and promising. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps, and they used him in Congress, and he had to stand up before Congress and basically say that, hey man, this was illegal stuff going on, and our president was behind it. And back at that time, it was a huge deal. I was a young kid during that time in the 80s. But I do remember we watched what we called the Iran-Contra affair, where the Iranians and then the Contras in Nicaragua were trading guns, and it was like, oh my God, this is crazy. I can't believe all this is happening. Well, at the same time all that was happening, drugs was coming into the United States. And I believe truly that the Black Mafia family is going to be a great TV show, because they get to build off the wire. So let's look at just the beginning parts. Drug trafficking drama inspired by a true story of two brothers who rose from decaying streets of the Southwest Detroit in the late 80s. Now they say late 80s, but that's 89. This is around the same time of the movie New Jack Swing, or New Jack City, that was New York City, that came out, that had Wesley Snipes and other people in it. And so this is now the series going back, and this will be a 5-year plan where they get to go back and take time over the whole next 5 years to really dig in and really go in. This is a great opportunity for these individuals, because the writers get to write great scripts, actors get to act, and they get to reminisce for all those that were living those experiences. One of the interesting parts about this time was that Detroit was known as, the greatest city on the earth. It was one of the most powerful cities in the 60s. But then, due to Dr. King being assassinated and all of the civil rights unrest for African Americans around the United States in the 60s, the riots occurred, and definitely after the murders of Dr. King. And so since this is Dr. King's birthday, which is weird, I just realized this. I remember, I was a kid. I wasn't born until 74. But as I watched Eyes on the Prize, Henry Hampton's great, magnificent VHS series now that I bought, and I've transferred it over to digital form, watching his 17-part VHS cassette series. Each episode was like 60 minutes. And so that's 60 minutes times 17 VHS cassettes. You can imagine the amount of videos and the amount of information that comes from it. But the amazing part, and I'll be doing that in a future blog at a future time, where you'll be able to see some of that stuff. But there's copyright. So unfortunately, due to copyright constraints, we can't show stuff without copyright. But I state fair use policy, as we all have. I state that we have the fair use policy, so that means everything that I'm discussing here has the right by fair use, as long as that we don't play entire streams of different people's data, right? We understand. but I can talk about it because I've watched it, and I'm pretty sure you'll watch it too on your streaming services. So for me, what I want to talk specifically about is in my beginning, in my opening, in my notes, I wrote some things down. I said, here, this is what I said. And I just want to put this in here at 20 minutes and 16 seconds. We've had a few people drop into the live stream and drop out, so that's kind of nice, but no problem. This is not really going to be a live. It's a live stream, but it's not going to have. One day it'll be a panel where I hope to have maybe future videos where I can have people online and we can do a panel. But this is just me giving my monologue, my opinion. And so we're going to discuss the opening of the series and this next section here. What I want to talk specifically is about season 1. And basically what it brought was two brothers. And this is very unique compared to The Wire. And we're going to be doing a contrast. We're going to be doing analysis against, like I said, The Wire is the standard, right? So when we talk about this show, we have to use Baltimore's David Simon, Ashkenaz, so-called Jew, Wire, who made billions of dollars and probably making many, many millions more off of that show. But he did such a, hey, when you look at Deuteronomy 28 and you see the curse of Deuteronomy on those people from verses 15 through 68, there's some of the most heinous curses that I can only imagine. I can't even say how horrific those curses are. I've spent many hours studying the Word of God and looking specifically at those curses in Hebrew, and the way Yah put those curses on those individuals because they did not obey the Lord and did not obey him many, many times. He gave many, many commandments to them, many, many times to obey. The reality is that they relate to our people today. And the reality is that I believe that African Americans are people, and just put this in their context, African American people are by far the richest African American people on the planet at this time. Let me be clear. I hate to say like Stephen A. right now, but let me be clear. African American people are the richest on the planet at this time. The opportunity and the skills that we have to make money is amazing. Okay, I'm a Cisco voice engineer, and I'm studying to keep and train and work in the telephone world of America, working with programs, and that's as a computer programmer. But that's not all. There's African Americans doing not just tech, but in all worlds they're rich. But at the same time, as a whole, we got to make sure we now not talk specifically about us as individuals, but as a whole, the African American 12%, the 40 million of us in America, being that we're the richest African Americans across the world when you compare it to an African in Africa, or an African in Europe, or an African in China, or an African in Japan, or an African in any other part of the earth. In America, we are the poorest of the poor. And I remember, there's only 500 million. So out of 500 million, we're 40 million. Let's put that into context again. Out of we will probably have 500 million people in America by 2050. We're at 2023. So by 2050, I believe it will be 500 million here. At this time, there's a lot of attacks. The Republicans have been behind it with build this wall, right? Build the wall. Donald Trump brought that out eloquently and brought a lot of European people on board. Because they can see the signs. The days where they came over in boats and boats and boats in the 1900s, people are coming in waves and waves and waves in 2023 over the Mexican border. So as any smart person would recognize, building a wall will block them from coming in. But the wall never gets built, right? Even Donald Trump pushed that he was going to build the wall, and the wall didn't get built. So the reality is that if we're going to get to 500 million people in 2050, which I believe that statistically will happen, and African American people are only a small 40 million, maybe 45 million by 2050. The statistics against us right now state that in the next 25 years, our race will probably grow maybe a 1 or 2%. Today in the African American community, black people are literally not marrying. I am single right now with no children because I was a destitute black man who had to go to college and because of mistakes that I made, I had to revert, and I had to spend 20 years trying to fix those mistakes. Sometimes if you make a mistake at 19, you may not get a chance to fix it, and you're done. So a 19-year-old kid makes a mistake and don't go to college, he don't get a second chance. She don't get a second chance. It's only a miracle that God can open doors, but that is a miracle. For example, as I now will testify and tell you my tragedy, to talk about the curse of Deuteronomy 28. I grew up with my brother, and my mother had us being married to a man that was her first love. And I would call this the 1990s. So why this is so important as it relates to this show. Me and my brother grew up with a single parent mother. And our single parent mom had us, and she tried to do the best that she could. She was a person that, in my humble opinion, did the best she could. But just like millions of girls are doing the best they can right now, it's not enough. It never will be enough. Why? Because you have to do things the right way. So when you do things wrong and you don't do things the right way, you open up doors, and I mean this, straight up doors, to things that sometimes you don't even get a second chance and you're not able to overcome. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Kenneth Perry. Thank you for joining. Appreciate you. Brother just joined. Thank you. And so you end up having to deal with those consequences. So when I sit back and I look at the Black Mafia family, and I look here at this, we're going to talk about some of the episodes right now. They are phenomenal. So here is, like I said, with my StreamYard, the different episodes. And this is season 1's episodes 1 through, I think it had about 7 episodes. And then we went into, now we're in season 2, and we are talking about 2 episodes in season 2. I'm watching, and we'll come to season 2 in just a second. Let me just do a recap of just season 1, which look, as you can see, you see 2 of everything. Why? Because my particular streamer service, there's so many people watching the show that they have 2 links. And, because if the servers get bombarded with too many links or too many requests, that server goes down. So thank God these smart people have multiple links where you can be able to watch and see it. And so there's two number ones. Then there's number 2. Number 1 talks about see it and touch it, obtain it. Meet your boys at Street War by moving his crew, the 50 boys, to a new location. He and his brother, they cook up a potent batch of drugs that creates enough demand to overcome their family crisis. Now, think about what you just read. They cook up drugs to sell to overcome their family crisis. Let me explain that. This is a black family, and many black families, my mama and my dad, prime example. Uneducated, right? Not able to have jobs, not able to get the degrees that they need. So what ends up happening is, divorce. So in the situation of this movie, they write it, or TV show slash movie, they write it as the man is a worker at GM, and the girl is a Wendy's. Swear to God, she works at Wendy's, dog. A woman has 2 grown kids, and she works at Wendy's. And we're talking the 1980s. And the kids are only about 20, which means they were born in the 60s. Okay? So, if they are at that age, what do you think the black female had? What skills did she have? She had no skills. So the guy has a job as a we call it blue collar auto worker, and what ended up happening to GM? Think about it. They had lost all the jobs. So all the people that were working there, they ended up losing all the jobs. Why? Because right there in the 80s, the cars that were being built were not big gas guzzlers no more in the 50s. So all the money that was made in the 50s with the big old Cadillacs, we're now in the 80s, and the blacks and the whites are going to Japanese cars because of the oil crisis. So the reality is, all the things that America won in 45, they lost by 80, because the same people they bombed, they rebuilt. So the same Japan that they bombed, the same Korea that they fought, they rebuilt. And as they rebuilt those places, what happened? They made cars. As they made cars, what happened? We started buying them. Today I have a Korean car called a Hyundai. I would have bought a Japanese car called a Honda, but the Hyundai was prettier than the Japanese Honda. But the fact of the matter is, I was not going to buy an American car. So think about all those jobs that are now gone because I was not going to buy a cheap American car, because we heard, and my mom and many of the people have heard that American cars are crappy cars. They used to call Ford fix and repair daily, because the cars were so messed up. And so growing up, having a Ford Thunderbird LX that was built in 1988, matter of fact, it died in 2002. So I had the car from 1990, I think 9, and it then died in 2002. But the car was built in 1988, so from 1988 to 2002, that's a pretty long time for that car. But it went through many owners, and I didn't have the car the whole time. But then right after that, I got another car, and we'll get all back on the story. So from the Black Mafia family, you see that Meech says that he wants to help his family. Well, the reason why he wants to help his family is because his family set him up on destruction. And the fact is, this is the question I have to ask. Are black people under the Deuteronomy 28 curse? Are black people as a whole under the Deuteronomy 28 curse? If you do analysis and you go and look at the neighborhoods around the country, you ask the question, when you go to Martin Luther King Boulevard of any town, what does it look like? Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in New York. Think about it now. My alarm is going off, so you may hear some background noise. I'm not moving. It'll go off in 15 more seconds. It has to cut off in a couple seconds. Time me to stand up and move. But are they as a whole? And I'd say yes. I'd say yes. I'd say, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Now, here's a question after you ask that question. If that is a true statement, if God has put African American people under the Deuteronomy 28 curse, will he lift us from that curse? That's the next question. Answer is yes. The Word of God teaches us how and when. And that's the book of Hebrews from the New Testament. So that's thousands of years ago. Thousands of years ago, our people were cursed. And then also, right after we were cursed, 3500 BC, Jesus Christ comes, he dies, he becomes a propitiation, an atoning sacrifice for our sin. And then God gives Paul revelations where he writes all those amazing books. And one of those books is called the book of Hebrews. Now, while that is being written by Paul, it doesn't mean, right? It doesn't mean that it is in effect or it has happened. I think even with the fact that Paul wrote those thousands of years ago, I think that the reality is it took thousands of years to now to get to the point where we are now. So I don't think that just because Paul did write those books in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it took all those years for the Gutenberg press and all the presses, writing to be done, for the German, Martin Luther, all the things that happened in history, all that happened. And while all that was happening, African people around the world were under the curse. As one of the curses says, we were sent to the far, far parts of the earth. I'm sorry, I should be letting you see me instead of looking at a piece of a screen. Unless I'm playing a movie, I'm not going to show the screen. You can see that screen for an hour, and it's like, okay, well, you ain't showing me nothing, right? But if you see this, you know that, okay, this is me talking directly to you for 37 minutes, and you can then fast forward to different sections, or at the timestamp hopefully will direct you to going forward and to the spots that are great. Thank God for YouTube, and thank God for the timestamps. And so I'm a person that's studying to become a pastor. I'm studying to become a doctor of divinity. I'm also studying to become a engineer, a Cisco voice, senior voice engineer. I am definitely passionate about the Word of God. I am, but I'm also angry because I'm experiencing the Deuteronomy 28 curses. I know my other African Americans have experienced Deuteronomy 28 curses. We can look at our past and our family lives and the last 30 years, 50, 100, going back and see Deuteronomy running in our family. And then we can see it in our family members now. My brother, for example, your brother, your sister. The bottom line is that it's not fair, but it's a different level of drama, a different level of pain. So as we talk about the Black Mafia family, we're going to do a study of talking about the 1980s and 90s. Sorry for those before that, but I'm a product of 1974 when I was born, and 1980s when I believe I had my first memory at 8 years old that I can really recall. I can't recall any memories prior to that. I can't recall Virginia. That's where I was born, Richmond, Virginia. I can't recall any city. I can't recall any home. But I do recall 1980, and I recall Lane Avenue in Jacksonville, Florida. My mama had a home there, and I stayed there. I recall having my first physical surgery on my penis, where I had to get circumcision redone because I guess the doctor messed up the first time due to the fact that I had I guess some type of not a deformity or whatever in my body due to, I guess, my mom not creating me completely. Deuteronomy 28. And then I grow up and I see my brother, and I see Damien, and I see him having to come into the earth and have meningitis, and my father not want to give him medicine because he is, quote unquote, a nation of Islam, and we don't believe in medicine, and I don't want no white doctor touching my black son, and ignorance, Deuteronomy 28. And so after you experience stuff like that, after you see stuff like that, what would you say? So my mom ends up becoming a tragedy because after her experiencing this, having children and both of them not being born completely as they should be, and then having a husband, excuse me, that is who joins the Nation of Islam and decides that I want more than one wife, and then cheats on my mother. My mother has to make a decision of whether she wants to stay, and then she decides, as many women do, to leave. And then of course that takes two hands that raise a family. That's very important to the success of any family. And that mother now becomes a single parent mother. That's Deuteronomy 28. And so that applies to millions of women in the African American community to this day. And we can go and we can trace it all the way back. And we can start, say, in the United States, because my grandfather is a product of 1945. And he was born in 1914 and married my grandmother on my dad's side in 1941. And was married to my grandmother for 65 years until she passed away at age 83 in 2000. Then lived another 20 years when he passed away at the age of 101 here in Jacksonville, Florida, where I was raised. And I spent time with my grandfather for the last 10 years of his life because I didn't even think he'd be alive. I mean, because I had been out in the military. I left Jacksonville. I went around the United States and went to seminary school in Oklahoma. And then I come back to Atlanta because the economy was crazy and everybody was in 2007 dealing with the mortgage-backed security crisis, and we all looking for jobs. And I decided to come to Atlanta because that was the only spot I thought I had a chance. Because where I was at in Oklahoma, there were no jobs, and of course Oklahoma is only 3 million people. So if you got 3 million people in a state where it's 10 million people in another state, or 15 million people in another state, who got more jobs, right? Exactly. So from that experience, I had the unique, hard time to spend time with my grandfather, and I saw what families should have been like, but it was too late. My grandfather is 91, 95, and 100. Okay, 100. That's a long. That's a century. A century. But growing up 20, 30 years earlier, it was a tragic experience growing up. I mean, I did the best that I could to try to be. I did the best that I could to just be like as a single older brother, to listen to my mother and follow her. But like every child, we need our fathers and our mothers together as one to raise us. So when I look at the black family and the black mafia family, one of the things that I want to talk about here at minute 43 is I want to talk about the marriage of the Flournoys. So at 43 minutes, and I want to talk about the Flournoys marriage. I want to say that right off the top of the dome that I am totally against the Flournoys and their marriage. I've been growing up and been alive for almost 50 years, 48. And I understand that our people on the Deuteronomy 28 curse. And I understand that it almost seems like when one bad thing happens, we got to wait for the next 3 things to happen, right? You used to say that bad things come in threes or some mess like that. You know, for example, yesterday 2 days ago, I was laid off the contract job that I got at a company that I work for that for reasons that were a lie. The real reason I was laid off was that the job did not need my expensive talent and they did not want to pay it. But then they tried to say that I was laid off because I wasn't performing well. So the lady that was trying to write me up by asking me every day. What am I doing every day? Give me an update on what you're doing. And I'm like, what? So what are you saying? You want me to call you and ask you for more opportunities? Well, I did. And every time I would try to call and ask her for opportunities, she says she's busy. She wouldn't give me any. So my thought process is, she makes the argument to say that Henry takes too much time to get certain things done. And the reality is, she never said that directly to me. She never said that at any meeting that we had. She never said that on a Thursday meetings that we would have, that everybody's supposed to have. She say nothing. So from the standpoint of leadership, she was a horrible leader. A horrible leader. And that's what I hate about the Flournoys. These were horrible parents. But I understand why they were. Because they're under the Deuteronomy 28 curse. So when you understand the curses and you get to understand the curse of the law, and you realize that they are under the curse of the law, and here's the very interesting point. They were Christians. This is a very interesting point about this show. They were Christians. Swear to God. They were Christians. Okay? I'm going to now find that episode, and I'm going to let you see what I saw a few minutes ago. So one moment. I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to talk to you while I'm seeing. So in episode, season 2, episode, I guess, was season 2, episode 2. As I scroll down, I go back up, click on, go back up. Thank you. Click on season 2. Thank you. And there's 2 episodes, and the title is called Family Dinner, Family Business. That's the name of their episodes. Family Dinner, Season 1, Family Business. Let me put it on the screen, and let me give you some insight. So this is Season 2, and this is now they are, there's 2 brothers, Terry Flournoy and another brother. I forgot the other brother's name. They become what's called the Black Mafia family, and they create a World Is Mine montage in Atlantic City during the period of the 1990s. This is during the time where the Freaknik was big here. Man, it was the thing. I remember in 1991, 92. I graduated high school in 93, so everybody and mama knew about Freaknik from probably from 2 Live Crew in the 80s with Me So Horny all the way up to the end of Freaknik. I mean, to where it ended. And then, of course, you got to look at New Jack City coming out, New Jack Swing. You got to look at all of that and what entailed. And the reality was that it was a dangerous and tragic place for black people in Atlanta. What they don't talk about in this was what happened in 1980, 79, 80, and 81. Yeah, in Atlanta. Much less Detroit. Detroit, of course, had their tragic riot, and then they had their breakdown with all of the downtown areas. Whites said, we're going to own the land, and we're going to not do ish with the land for the next 40 years. Just let these people die. Just let the property get condemned. And then once the property is condemned, we're going to rebuy it. We're going to regentrify it. And so that is why today regentrification is now coming back to Detroit, and why my former pastor is trying to build a church in the place where he was raised after moving for 25 years to Jacksonville, Florida. Why? Because black people in the Deuteronomy 28 curse. It almost seems that everything that African Americans do as a whole, there's a problem. There's always a price. There's always something that goes wrong. Always something that goes wrong. That's weird. Somebody's putting some messages here in my notes, and I don't know why that's being put in there. Weird. All right, don't worry about that. Comment, we'll turn the live stream off. See if I can turn the live stream off real quick. I think I can, but I can always turn it off later. And so it always seemed like no matter what, African-American people as a whole, whenever we try to do something great, it ends up turning down. It ends up going into trouble. And so, but now gentrification, like it's happening in Atlanta, like it's happening everywhere around the United States, it unfortunately always affects who? That little 12% of the population, that 40 million people that were brought over here as slaves, okay, that now are so-called free, but we always tend to mess up the freedom that we think that we have, or we don't seem to operate in that freedom. So, as I now will get a screenshot, I'm going to come back to the middle of the screen, and I'm going to press the episode I was talking about. I'm going to go down to where I'm at. I'm at 30 minutes and 39 seconds of episode 1. 30 minutes and 39 seconds of episode 1. In this particular episode, they're going to bring in all these characters that don't really matter. I don't care about the characters other than Meech and his brother and the mom and the dad. Those are the 4 people that this blog is about. And then, of course, overall, the world of drugs and crime in the inner city Baltimore, in the inner city Atlanta, and the inner cities of all places. Okay? Yes, perfect. So as I get the chance, I get to talk about certain scenes. I'm going to be able to like pause and let you see the scene, and I'll be able to talk about them as my heart breaks. So this is a scene right here where a black man, African, shoots another African because they're rivals in selling drugs. Drugs that kill the rest of the people that are using them, because those people are miserable because their life is crap, and so to cope, they do drugs. That's the only reason why people do drugs. They do drugs because they're trying to cope. If their life was happy, there's no need to do drugs. Now, the brother doesn't die. He gets shot in the eye, and then what ends up happening is the doctors botch the surgery, and then the family sues the doctors, and he gets like $1 million settlement, puts that into buying a car business. Well, in that car business, which you're about to find out in the future episodes, it's actually already been out, they started using these majestic cars, limos, and they were planting them with drugs and running them interstate across the United States back and forth. They built like a mega network of interstate, which is from a business, CPA, business perspective, MBA perspective, phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal. The only thing is that it's illegal. So prime example, I was watching the show called The Wire. And in the show called The Wire that I was watching, there was a scene where McNulty was talking to D'Angelo Barksdale and asked him, why couldn't y'all just sell the drugs and walk away? Why did you got to... There was a man that saw a crime. He testified in court. And the guy who was D'Angelo Barksdale, due to the drug dealers paid off a witness, got D'Angelo off. So instead of just letting the black man be, because he was doing the right thing, they killed him. So that is the most evil of evil. But why is that evil? Where God said that there will be enmity, there will be anger, a wrath between man and woman, man and man, black man and black man, black woman, black woman. Why do you think in the black community we have so much vitriol and evil in our relationships today? Deuteronomy chapter 28. And so when I look at BMF, when I look at this scene, instead of being in a war, it's the guy got his door open, he's leaning to work on something, and someone walks up and tries to kill him in the head. Now, they were stupid because they could have done the smartest thing, but instead, because they want to kill a person, shooting somebody in the head is the fast way to do it, but there's no guarantee either. So for some reason, this guy survives, right? And so he now gets vengeance, and he decides he's going to become a drug conspirator with his brother, who really ran everything. And sadly, later in the 1990s, they get captured. No, 2005, they get what we call a RICO statute. And just like the mob, they call themselves Mafia, Black Mafia. Well, just like White Mafia, you're going to go into jail, and you're going to go into jail for life. And Big Meech is in jail right now, and he probably is going to die there, no matter how long he thinks. And of course, we're talking federal, so federal jail is just not as nasty as state jails, but still it's jail. And the reality, you're away from your family. You're in a building. I mean, it's like me. I live in an apartment, right? And I hurt my knee, and I've been in COVID for 3 years. And in COVID, you basically are in this house. Well, at least I can see people. They can come to my house. They come in my house. But just imagine you can't walk out your house. You can't go nowhere for 15 years, for 30 years. You're in the same place for 30 years. I can't even imagine that. So, what we're going to talk about now is some of the parts that blew me away in episode 1. So this will be a reaction video to episode 1 while talking specifically about just the BMF, the New Jack City, the Power, the Wire. I mean, whatever show that's in this genre, because this genre, I would call this genre black drug entertainment. Black drug entertainment. They're not shows about school. They're not shows about success. They're shows about one gang selling drugs, other gang selling drugs. They fight to take over each other or kill each other out. As a mafia, as they imitated. So just like these African Americans were trying to imitate the Edomites, the Italians, aka Edomites, Esau Edomites from the Old Testament, that's what we're doing today, doing the same thing. Why? Deuteronomy 28. So, as I now open up the door and let Booby out, my doggy out, because it's getting cold and it's about 5. And it's the best time for them to get outside is about right now, before it gets too cold. I'm hoping the temperature goes back up. It went to 25 degrees last night. Man, sometimes, normally it's about 55. It dropped to 25. So, so that's not good. So anyway, so the next part I'm going to talk about, as I don't show you, I'm going to fast forward and let's see where we are. All right, get past this. So we're going to fast forward to 30, let's see, 25 minutes, 23 minutes. Okay. 23 minutes. So I'm going to talk, there's many subplots, but I will say this is not like The Wire. The Wire, it was a book, meaning that, I swear to God, you can see episode 1, go to episode 2, go to episode 3, go to episode 4, go to season 1, season 2, season 3, season 4, season 5. And you can tie episode 1 of season 1 to episode 5, season 5. That there was something in episode 1 that matched what happened in season 5 years later in the last episode. Because they had a script that was all the way flushed out. If this show is like that and it has a script all the way flushed out, this will be a gold mine. I don't think they will, because like I said, David Simon of The Wire did such a amazing thing that words cannot describe it at all. So don't get past this. I want to get you to the mom and the son. And then now let's show this thing. Yeah, let's show this. Okay, so this right here is the oldest brother, Meech. I think I've got his name, Terry. That's his name, Terry Flournoy. Or no, Terry is the that's not. I think that's no. It's Terry is the older brother. This is the younger brother, but he becomes the de facto leader. All right, he becomes the de facto leader, and basically he's the one that was the front of BMF. He was tall, about 6'2", good looking, and he was basically trying to get all the boys in to follow. He was literally trying to get black men to say, listen, we're going to work together and we're going to try to create a family. The problem is the context. He did not put 3 and 3 together to get 6 and say, wait a minute, everything that we're doing is illegal. There is no way that this will work. It won't work. I mean, these are non-college students, right? They're non-college graduates, and they're selling a product called drugs. How simple can it be? But the problem is, it is federally illegal. So the reality is that the consequences are going to be dire because it's federally illegal. Okay? So the hardest part for me was that in some ways I respect these brothers and what they did, because they were able to do some things that were shocking. They were able to be leaders in their little group. But it really boiled down to wearing the flyest clothes, getting the girls and getting the sex, but at the end of the day, getting death because they were going to be shot by the bullet. And many of these black men are dead because they were being shot because they were trying to fight and they were trying to do something such as get money, as we would call it, get money. And so the tragedy about that is that these are the sons of, this is the actual son of one of the actual founders of BMF, the leader of BMF. This is his now son, and he's playing his father. And what's so amazing about it is he looks just like his dad, but he's playing his father. How many people do that? Well, here's why this is so big. Because of what has happened now with this new genre, this new content. Everybody and their mama is using YouTube to push their agenda for talking about crime. So there is Detroit and different other drug dealers now coming out on YouTube doing live streams, and they're talking about themselves being drug dealers and how they, had how the colder streets were back then and how we did things better back then. And they're trying to take drugs and they're trying to make it seem like it was the most honorable and noble thing of the world, yet at the same time, death, 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 murder, 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 death, drugs, slow murder, aka drugs, or fast murder by a bullet. Either way came to those people. And so the reality is Deuteronomy 28 was right there working. So, as I now fast forward and try to get to that scene, we're going to see him with his mom. And why it's important, I want to get there. After I get past, it was, I think right after here, right after this mess right here. Right after this mess right here. Okay, right after this mess right here. Now this is interesting. The plot, the subplot right here. They're trying to get an Asian woman who's in her 40s, who's a cop, to fall in love with this black guy who is a cop as well. He's a cop in Detroit. And there's certain Asians in Detroit. I don't believe Asians were even a factor of Detroit, Michigan. Booby, come on here, Booby. It's time to go. I mean, listen. If you go look at the statistics and census, the Asians live west of the Mississippi, And that's obvious. It's a straight flight to Japan. A straight flight to Tokyo. I mean, their home is still China and Japan. Why would they want to move? They got to go so far from getting home. So I don't necessarily agree with this writer or dialogue here. So I'm going to skip here. This actor is a very great actor. He's a very good B actor. He should have been a type A actor, but he did a lot of Tyler Perry movies. And unfortunately, he played negative parts. Deuteronomy 28 effed him up. And it's effed up most of our black actors. They all had to play drug dealers or cops or bad cops. It was always playing a bad role of whatever they were doing. Deuteronomy 28. Why, though? Because the Ashkenaz that owned this, wrote this. They want to portray, and they are doing a hell of a good job, portraying our people as destructive, because they know if all you see on TV is destructiveness, what are you going to do? You're going to live destructively. That's why the Word of God is so important, so that you understand that, hey, it's not about that, but again, that's why we should take heed to what we hear. So I'm gonna try to go back. All right, let's go back here. I guess I got to find it. Oh, wow. Look at this. Look at this right here. Shot directly in the head. A man is shot directly in the head on national television by another black man who sits there strong and all and shoots this guy in the head. Not military, not being in a war, but in the neighborhood. Even Europeans don't do that today. Why is it that the Europeans can live in enclaves and they do kill each other, but on a tiny level compared to the little bitty small 12% of the African American people that live in America, the richest of all Africans around the world? I did a statistical analysis of how much an African American gets paid. And it's so surreal that I said this before I just got laid off from my job on Friday. But I did it, and I did a research. I was making $62 an hour in my previous job. Shocked to say that. And before that, I was making 55. Before that, I was making 52. I've been going up from pretty much 2012, starting at about $35 an hour, to where I am right now, making $62, or was making $62 an hour. That's almost double the salary because of the skills that I've developed. I did an analysis of the average monthly, and then you can do the dividing and get the daily and the weekly and yearly salary of a Nigerian in Nigeria. Nigeria is the biggest population in the whole state of Africa, or whole continent of Africa. More people live in Nigeria than any other part of the big continent of Africa, which is like 2.5 times the size of the United States. You can put 2.5 United States in the size of Africa to fit. That's how small our United States is, no matter how big we think it is. We ain't nothing compared to Africa. But even with that being said, we're only 375 million, close to 400 million. 200 million live over in Nigeria alone. 200 million. So, in those 200 million, what do you have? You got war, you got poverty, you got strife, you got Boko Haram, you got religious conflicts, but more than just religious conflicts, which all this comes back to religion. You got oil and land and taken away from China by China and India and the United States and Europe and Russia. It's five places right there. And we're talking. I'm looking at Africa right now on my globe. I have a little globe in my living room of the Earth and all the planets. And it's so funny. Africa is pointing right to me as we speak, and I'm talking about Africa. And then I look at the little islands or the little continents above Africa, and you think that the Russia and China and
all the northern parts of the earth is so much bigger than Africa. And then you get a reality when you find out that they've been lying to us on the maps, in the globes, at school, that they were telling us things like, you know, Africa is nothing. Yet at the same time, they go to Africa and they're pulled out billions of dollars of diamonds, rubies, pearls, oil, gas, gold, and the like. And they're still finding new stuff every day. But what did the scriptures say in Deuteronomy chapter 28? Oh, come on. Don't get back, PC. Damn it, stop. All right, what did Deuteronomy say? Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, one of the verses in Deuteronomy 28 said that another land would come and take your land. If you look at the earth, has anyone visited China and took China? No. Has anyone visited Japan and took Japan? Well, America did, but gave it right back in the Marshall Plan. Korea? Well, America came in, but gave it back. Russia? No. Germany? America came, but gave it back. France? America came, but gave it back. India? English came, but gave it back. The only planet on the earth where people have come in and taken, and still to this day take, is Africa. And so who are the descendants of Africans? I am. So when a person says to me, well, there's no way that African can be a descendant of Hebrew Israelites, they're lying. Because first off, they're not studying the word. And then number two, you're not studying the word. Because if you study, you will get the revelation for yourself and no one could turn you away. God would have to come and tell you. But there's no human being on the planet Earth that's going to tell me that what I believe is wrong, because there's too much evidence. There's too much tragedy. There's too much pain that's going on to see this. Did you just see that? With all these people around, he shoots a man in the head in broad daylight to put fear in the eyes of all of his so-called black colleagues. Look at that. Deuteronomy chapter 28. Deuteronomy chapter 28. Tragedy, man. Tragedy. So now, after you've seen men be murdered at the age of 21, 22, this ain't Vietnam. This ain't war for America. This is war for a street corner. See the difference? This ain't war for the flag of the United States of America. This is just war mere for the fact because I want to sell some drugs to get rich. Deuteronomy 28, bro. So as I said in the beginning of this message, and now it's 1 hour and about 13 minutes, I want to find it. And I'm hoping to find it. Let's try to scan back and see. 1980s, my friend. Yes, this is what I want to show you, the jump cut. And it's so great. I'm so glad it jump cuts to this now. Great. So it jump cuts to this scene right here. The parents are so ignorant that they don't even know that both of their sons have just seen people murdered. That both of their sons have basically participated in murder. And all she cares about is the grandson that's going to grow up and become a killer himself
and she don't even fucking know it. That pisses me off. And I'm sorry, Father, for cursing, but it pissed me off. Because the reality is that parents, especially those in the African American community, do not want to raise kids that become killers. They don't want to raise children that end up becoming murderers. And that's what those boys did. The two sons of this couple ended up becoming the Black Mafia family leaders, and ended up becoming, as New Jack City's and the other gangs and other rivals and other, there's so many stories out there, man, I can't even tell you. But the fact is that I believe the reason why is because of Deuteronomy 28. I believe that the root of why we as African Americans are stooping to that level is because that those boys do not respect their father. I believe that those boys hate that their father was a nothing. I believe those boys chose drugs because they hated their fathers. And they hated their father in a sense as the scriptures said it would. The scriptures told us that the children will hate their father. The father will hate their children, and the children will hate their father. That's one of the curses of Deuteronomy chapter 28. And I believe that one of the big things in the African American community of why we are where we are is because we hate our father. And of course, we can say our mother too. But we won't say our mother because she tends to be the birth canal, right? She is the birth canal. She's the nourisher. But the reality is the father is the leader. He's the trainer. He is the person that makes you into a future father yourself. So now, as you can see, these two people are taking care of a grandchild. And they loving their grandchild and they're so happy. But they missed the boat even though they it's like they don't see the big picture. The big picture is that their children are killing people by selling drugs and they don't know it. Matter of fact, there's a scene which you'll see in a minute where the mother is at Wendy's. And I'm going to hope to find it. The mother is at Wendy's. And she sees her son. He comes up. That's her son, right? That's her oldest. That's one of her youngest son right there. But he's the leader of the family. He sees that, and this is a great scene right here. And I would like to go back 10 seconds and let's see if we can watch it. This is perfect. Perfect scene. It's buffering. Let it buffer. Yep, it's buffering. Get caught up. And I'm going to press play. Of course, you can't hear it because I don't have any, I won't turn the volume on. And basically what's happening is, it looks like it's looping right now. They're having an issue, as every married couple has. And the issue is their children. The problem, of course, is what do you do? I got two boys that I love, that we raised, and now they decided to say, hell to school, hell we're going to college, I'm going to sell drugs. It's illegal. And what do the parents do? Instead of going to the police and telling the police about their children, to put them in jail, they let their kids sell drugs.
the father who knows is going on, and the mother who knows is going on, sit there and they do nothing. As I get close to the microphone, they do nothing. So then, we are only in season, and of course, like I said, season 2. This will be a 5-year plan. The question that I will be bringing up as we do more episodes over the next 3-4 years is, what is the impact of this actual scene, of this moment from season 2, episode 1? And I'm going to tell you what I think the impact is going to be. Divorce. Yeah, I think this couple will divorce. But does that mean anything? No, because black couples have divorced ever since the 70s. And this is 1980. But divorce is not the end of the world. It's horrific, but it's not the end of the world. What the issues I think about is who's going to die. But you know what ended up happening to them? We know. They weren't shot. They were put in penitentiary. So that means that the money's still there. That means mama could go visit. Dad can go visit. Because they didn't die like everyone else around them died. They're still alive. So in some ways they won because they get to have their kids on this earth, and others lost their kids forever. And if they're not born again, they're in hell, and we know the consequences of that. So as I go forward, there should be a scene where the mom is working and she is basically trying to take care of herself. Now, the reality is that they're empty nesters. The kids have already grown. They are selling drugs. They're out there on their own, okay? They've already sold drugs. They're out there on their own. The reality is that it should be time for them parents to experience being empty nesters, but they can't. He's still working, and the father has to work, won't take the money, of course, of their son, smartly. And what's amazing about this is the religious part of it, because I have spiritual roots that are tied to Detroit, Michigan. And I'll be doing a future blog where I will talk about my spiritual roots in a video, because I think it's so important to document that, because as you know, we get older, we need to pay homage to where we come from spiritually. Looks like I missed it. I can't. And this will be the scene where he starts driving the limo, and this is where they make the idea of selling drugs through the cars. And this is how they kind of connect the Asian with the black. But remember what I heard yours truly say, and this is so true. And I swear to God, it's so true. This is a statement that a Pan-Africanist guy made, who I don't completely agree with him at all. But he said this is so true. He said a black man will never get a top-notch white woman or a top-notch Asian woman or a top-notch woman from another race. He did not know the knowledge that I know, that Deuteronomy 28 is the reason why. He just says they won't. And he's right. He never, but you know, his name is Dr. Umar Johnson. He never answers why. But the reason why is because God's word says that there will be calamity, there will be sorrow, and till you obey Yah. So every black man out there that doesn't obey God, that doesn't want to follow him, that doesn't want to live for God, every one of them that doesn't obey God, they are going to suffer. We are suffering. I lost my job yesterday, and that's suffering. And now I have to find a new job in my career at the worst time, beginning of the year, and believe in God that I can. I just had an interview on Thursday for a job and was treated with such disrespect. And I know I'm qualified. I live right next to the place. I'm right in the city. But the asshole that interviewed me was saying to me, yeah, I see you working, but you've been changing jobs. I'm like, I'm employed. What are you talking about? And all he was trying to do was say, I don't like you because you are black. Deuteronomy. It was all race. It was not my performance. He never tested me to find out what I was good or bad in. It was just he hated me because of the color of my skin, not the content of my character. And the hardest part about it is that should not be. But then Deuteronomy 28 says the people that disobeyed Yah, and these verses are powerful, that they would be calamity. But then here's the good news. God gave the answer in the book of Hebrews, the New Testament. So in the book of Hebrews, I've read it for years. Hebrews 1, 2, 3, all the way. Hebrews 11, a Faith Hall of Fame chapter. And many ministers I've heard say, well, we don't know who wrote Hebrews. Some say it was written by Paul, the Apostle Paul. It doesn't matter who wrote it. The question is, what is the book of Hebrews and the Pauline epistles pointing to? It's pointing to the Hebrew Israelites of the Old Testament. And the reality is, I study it now and look at Hebrews today, compared to studying over the last 25 years. The Word of God has been so illuminating to me now that Yah has forgiven us from Deuteronomy 28. But you must obey YESHUA and believe that he died, that he lived, right? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believeth, John 3:16, in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. Well, that doesn't just go to, it goes way beyond just believe. It goes believing and studying and studying and studying and studying and studying and studying. And I'm not talking about church. I'm talking about reading and listening and studying. And as Jesus said, taking heed to what you hear, for the measure of thought and study that you give to what you hear be the measure of virtue that you get out of it. So the revelation that I started to get was that the Word must become so part of your mind that it gets into your soul and your spirit. But it can't get into your soul and spirit until you spend the hours and hours and hours reading it into your mind, out loud or with your inner voice, or having played an audio. Or I use Audible, for example, and I let it be played for me all the time. And so as I sit back and I look at BMF and I look at other episodes of this show, and I look at The Wire, and I look at the whole genre that's now coming out, that you will see many, many more over the next, I would say over the next probably 10 to 15 years, until we change, because reality TV has kind of died, and everything now is going to go into content. Everything is going, no more, Real Housewives, all that stuff is done. It's going to be content. So that's why on YouTube now, you're seeing Al Prophet making, his name is Al Prophet. He's from Detroit. And he spends hours and hours and hours making content talking about the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s Detroit. And this is one of those shows that comes from it, because there's more gangs than just BMF. There was the Black Gorilla Family. There's YB Young Boys Incorporated. There's so many other different gangs in Detroit at this time. We're only seeing one video, one series of two boys. Because, hey, it's amazing. But all of this is to say that Deuteronomy 28 is the root of why our people are going to these levels of drugs, because we are not able to be doctors and lawyers. We're not able to get into grad schools and get PhDs. When our African-American men grow up without fathers or without mothers and fathers and coupled in matrimony, you don't have the rules and the regulations to be able to know how to walk and talk and deal in this world. And so when Satan is coming with his demons, when he comes with the principalities and the rules of the darkness of this world, or the spiritual wickedness in high places to come at us,
We fall because we're not strong, because we're not aware of his word. And then we're also not aware of the natural sides too, because the Bible doesn't cover everything. Some things are mores and values that are supposed to be inculcated or brought to you from your parents. But what if you don't have that father? What if your mother wasn't taught? You don't get it then. Therefore, you can't be. And so the lesson that I've learned as a man, especially as a man that grew up without his father, especially as a man who grew up without his mother. My mother died when I was 25 years old. I only had 25 years with her. I had to get into the word. I had to do something drastic beyond everyone's comprehension. I had to go attend a seminary in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And then I had to go attend college in the University of Oklahoma, Norman, Oklahoma. And I had to attend other colleges. And now I'm studying to get my PhD or my Doctor of Divinity degree. Because I realized that I'm not going to get it from my mom. She's dead. I'm not going to get it from my dad. He left me and my brother when we were 5 and never seen him since. My uncles, I'm not getting it from them because they've all either died or had a tragic end of life or tragic 60s and 70s. If they make it to their 80s. And odds are they won't. My father, I think, is 76. He'll be 77 years old. And the last time that I saw him was when I got commissioned in the United States Army as a second lieutenant, June of 1995. He came with my grandfather and my mother and my grandmother to my commissioning. And if you ever heard of a commissioning, it's when a person that becomes a United States Army officer, going back all the way to the Revolutionary War of George Washington. There's in the military, there are positions of leadership and there are positions of followership. And the officers are the leaders and the enlisted are the followers. And so the officers are the ones that give commands, and they're the ones that have to be responsible for platoons, companies, battalions, regiments, and on. And for me, the bug hit me, I guess G.I. Joe in the 80s, watching G.I. Joes, that I wanted to be a military man. And of course, seeing Full Metal Jacket and other videos, I decided I'm going to become a soldier. And this is right when this is right when Saddam's first war, Kuwait, came, the War of Kuwait. And I joined 1991 as an E3, and then I got to an ROTC, Georgia Military College, in a college here in the middle of Georgia called Milledgeville, and I got my commission in 95. My dad was forced to come to my commissioning as I got my commission. And in the commission, you give an oath, and you have to raise your right hand and swear that you would solemnly obey the Constitution of the United States against all powers, foreign and domestic, that you bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this oath freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, that you will discharge all of the orders from the commanders that are upon me, so help me God. I do. And every soldier, every cadet, every soldier, enlisted or officer around the country, around the world, throughout time, since we've been in the military, has been in existence, has had to take that exact same oath. And I remember taking that oath, and I remember my father. And I remember looking at him, and I remember him coming to see me, and he was angry. At this time, this had to be about, 95. And he did not know, I hadn't seen him probably for about 10 years prior to that, because he left when I was 5 and went and remarried like 6, 7 times. And my mom, of course, did everything as every woman does, to raise us the best she could. But it broke her heart. I think it put her in an early grave, to be truly honest. I think the reason why she died at 49 was because of the divorce that happened to her when she was in 1980. I think when the divorce happened in 1980, her life was on a ticking time bomb, and she died 21 years later. So I do believe that what happens to us in life can have a drastic impact if you don't get into the hands of God and you don't get the healing that takes hours and thousands in time. Because everybody's life is going to be different. Everyone's walk is different. Everyone must meet God differently, and then God must deal with them differently through the processes of sanctification, healing, to be able to have that victory. But it's not going to be able to be done with no one else but you and God. It's only on you and Him. So one of the things that
I remember when I saw my dad way back in those days, I was angry at him. I was so mad. He left me, my brother, at 5, and when my brother was 3, I was 5. I'm a junior, so I'm named right after him. So I have to be always called, hey junior, hey junior. And as we know, there's lots of juniors around the world, and it's an honor if you got a good father. But it's not an honor if you got a bad one. It's not an honor if you got a bad one, I promise you. But as I was not a born-again Christian in 1995, and I wasn't living for God, I hated him, and I really hated him, and I wanted him to feel that hatred. So as I was getting my bars, and the ceremony is where you're at this big old stadium at Georgia Military College, and I'm in my Army uniform, and my sergeant major, who was an African-American man, who wasn't my father, but I treated him like he was my father from high school, came, and he was the honor, the man of honor. In essence, he was the dad that I wish I could have had. And here at the same place was my actual dad. And the man looks at Sergeant Major Sellers, my father, that's why I say the man. And Sergeant Major Sellers looks at him, and I acknowledge Sergeant Major Sellers, that's my father. And the look of my dad's face, and I know Sergeant Major Sellers probably said, wow, man. Because he was so proud of me that I accomplished this feat that is very hard to accomplish. Only so many lieutenants get commissioned per year across the United States of America by the Congress, by the act of Congress. And at the same time, not only 1% of America want to serve anyway, right? So we got 400 million of us in America. That means what? 4 million want to be military? 1%? So you can honestly see that's a tiny number. Well, just think about African Americans. We're 12% of that 375 million. 12% of that 375 million. And out of that 12%, we should be at 50 million right now. We're only at 40. We've had so many births that have been either murdered or murdered by abortion, obviously, but also murdered by going to jail, murdered by being shot in the streets, murdered by this black mafia family. Yeah. Think about how many boys were shot as these men rose up in the game. How many boys died in Detroit, Michigan? Cass Technical High School, Southfield, that's a suburb, but downtown Detroit, Cabo Arena. Okay? Why this hits me and why it's so powerful is that I have a spiritual connection to Detroit, and it all happened because of a man that came out of Detroit. And his name was Reverend Keith A. Butler, Sr. He has a son, a junior. He has a junior too. And he started a church in Detroit, Michigan, downtown Detroit, and built it up from a small, tiny church to a church of 30,000 members. Started in 1978, and by the time I joined in 1997, that church was 30,000 members. And in that place of it's called Word of Faith, International Christian Center is the name of that church. Since then, that church, of course, is moved to Southfield, Michigan. They bought an old, I believe it was a Catholic campus for monks, and they turned it around into a church. And now Detroit is, because of all the regentrification and all the old properties being sold and pushing everybody out, Detroit is hot now. Everybody and their mama is buying new land. The downtown area that was really crappy going for millions of dollars now. Okay? Just like what's happening in Brooklyn, or I would say Brownsville, New York, Brooklyn. All those poor people that live in those ghettos, they're going to get pushed out. Because the whites are going to come in and they're going to take that property, they're going to make it $1 million. And you ain't going to live there if you can't afford $1 million. And I'm just being honest. You can't afford that mortgage. You're gone. We call that regentrification. And that's capitalism in its evilest way. There's always good and bad capitalism. That's the bad capitalism. That's the immorals. That's having lack of morals. And so because of, the stories like BMF, while we can look at it, and a lot of my African-American brothers will be angry with me, and they probably say, man, hey, this is our people, right? This is us. This is us. We need to be proud of us. How can I be proud when the majority of the movie or TV show is on every episode 2 or 3 people have been shot at or killed? How can I be proud to know that men are going to have adultery or they're going to have affairs on their girlfriend or their wife? How can I be proud that all of this, the Lord said in Deuteronomy 28, verses 16 through 68, would happen if my people do not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God and observe to do all that I commanded you this day? Yah said if, meaning that it did not have to happen. It only happened because you wanted it to happen, because you didn't obey. So the reality is that we must obey, and we must understand the value of obedience, because that is how we can walk in the power and the victory that we deserve to walk in. But if we walk in the hardness of heart, because of Satan and the rulers of darkness of this world, the most powerful demonic levels of Satan, control our people, my black people, we're talking about it as a whole in particular, those who are not going to church, not hearing the word, the true word of God, not the fake word, the real word of God, then the outcome is this. The outcome is murder. The outcome is seeing someone die. The outcome is getting so used to death that by the time you're 19 years old, you've seen 5 or 6 dead bodies. I'm a soldier. I was trained to kill. But I don't go looking to see dead bodies, even though I know how to use many guns. That is because everyone needs to be prepared to fight. But at the same time, we should be not expecting to see the fight happen in my apartment complex. Amen. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I will be doing many more reactions to more episodes. As you can see, this is episode 1, Family Dinner. The next time we'll talk about episode 2. I have to take the time and watch each of these. Looks like they got 5 stars someone gave of this first episode, so they believed it was a really good episode. I don't like to watch everything up front. I like to take it, digest it, meditate on it. As the Bible says, take heed to what you hear, right? So I'm here, I'm taking heed. And on this Sunday evening, I want to say thank you, Lord, for helping me to put these words into audio form, from my brain to my mouth to the microphone. May the microphone work in the name of Jesus. And may these messages touch people's lives. May it touch my life a year from now, 6 months from now, whatever. I definitely want to give a shout out to Lead Attorney. I want to also give a shout out to the late, great Kevin Samuels, the Godfather, for opening doors to us. And I miss you, and I don't even know you, but being as that you are an Oklahoma City native, and I lived in Norman, and I've been to Oklahoma City, went to OU like you did, and you're an 89 graduate, I'm a 2001 graduate. We would have never saw each other, but I believe that we're family just because we're Sooners. And so I say to you, Boomer Sooner, brother. Boomer Sooner. Shout out to the Bible Gateway, .com, of one of the best tools to study the Word of God for this generation. And I definitely want to give a shout out to Faith Christian Center, aka Impact Church, which is connected to Keith A. Butler and Word of Faith International Christian Center of Detroit, Michigan, where this TV show, the Black Mafia family, originated from. And even though I don't agree with a lot of the things in the show, just like I don't agree with a lot of things with Power and other shows, I truly believe we can learn even from some of the evil stuff that we see on these shows. We have to eat the hay, spit out those sticks, and pray for those people in Yeshua's name. And so, Lord, I thank you. And that is it. We have done our hour and 45 minutes.